Hey, David. Thank you for being on this show today.
Thanks, Ree. Thanks for having me.
So, what got you started on writing this book about mind management?
Yeah, the new book is Mind Management, Not Time Management. And the way that I got started on it was writing my first book. About 10 years ago, almost exactly, I got a book deal to write my first book. I was not a writer. I hated writing as a kid, did not think of myself as a writer, uh, but I had written some blog posts and got a book deal. And quickly realized that nothing that I had learned about productivity had prepared me to write a book. I had been a productivity enthusiast. I loved getting things done and was always trying different tools. But when it came time to write a book, I realized I was just banging my head against the wall for 12 hours a day. And just to get like 15 minutes of writing that came easily. And I had tried to clear away my whole schedule. I fired clients. I cut off a lot of my social life. I outsourced things. My meal preparation, household chores, cleaning the house, all this stuff. I just cleared out my whole schedule, and I just still couldn't really get it progress going on the book. And I even had a friend say, just look at the dates on your contract and break it down. And it was like 250 words a day. Okay, cool. I put that on the calendar and everything. No, it doesn't work that way. You can't just like sit down and write 250 words a day. You have to have the thoughts behind those 250 words first. You have to like get that all organized. And I did suffer through writing that book. But when the smoke cleared on that process, I wanted to figure out how I had managed to accomplish this. I had started to develop patterns and routines to make that sort of moment of flow happen, to make those insights happen. And I started to dig into the neuroscience and the psychology of creativity. And I started to see patterns there. And so I wrote a blog post in 2012 called Mind Management, Not Time Management. And that prompted Dan Ariely, the behavioral scientist, to reach out to me. And he was working on an app called Timeful. And we collaborated on that app. I was the design advisor to the team, helping them integrate sort of a mind management philosophy into that app. And then that app sold to Google. And I've all along been experimenting. I've even redesigned my entire life around my creative output. I moved to Colombia 5 years ago, where I now live. And so during all that time, I've really been trying to tweak this system to have a consistent way to manage creative energy toward having those moments where you have the ideas come easily to you. And so I think I've got it. So the book just came out, and I have like a far more healthy approach to creativity now, thanks to the things that I've learned.
So, how do you think the being a creative engine has helped you, and what about creativity is so important in today's world?
Well, I mean, as far as it helping me, I think that I had sort of settled into unhealthy patterns of getting creative work done. I wanted to create my own thing, but I just became it. It just became very unsustainable. It was just working around the clock, damaging relationships, of just being obsessed with trying to um, create things and trying to deal with the day-to-day world along the way. And so being able to have the confidence that I have a system to manage the energy, to manage my projects so they go forward consistently, uh, is just great for my mental health in general, because take, for example, something like writing that book. It was just this huge single to-do item that was never done. And I didn't know or have the confidence that I would arrive at the point where I would get it done. But now I have a better perspective of how the creative process works, how my energy works along with that creative process, how the cycles in the world are there that you can harness to propel your creative projects forward. And so it's just day to day a lot more relaxing to be me than it was before. And I think that my work improves as a result of it. Now, as far as why creativity is so important, this wasn't the reason that I became a creator. Um, but in this age of AI, where if you can teach a human how to do something, you can automate it, or you can outsource it, and it will soon be automated. Kai-Fu Lee, who was who was a AI expert, worked for Google, uh, projected 40 to 50% of jobs being replaced by AI in the next 10 to 20 years or so.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
a lot of people think, and that is kind of scary. And a lot of people think that is scary. And, there's a whole other conversation about whether that should happen, but it's happening, or it appears to be happening. And it's actually very freeing for us as humans, because it means that, well, now we can go back to being creative. And in fact, if you want to have an edge as a human, you need to be creative. So you can sit down and you can type 50,000 nonsense words in a day or so. But a computer could generate 50,000 nonsense words in, instantly, faster than you could blink. So, where the
Have you
value
seen the
lies is
yeah.
in writing that novel, or the thoughts behind the words, not in the words themselves.
Have you seen the stuff on GPT-3? And they produced content that has apparently like fooled people as well. Some of the content produced by GPT-3 ranked like on the top page, on the first page of Hacker News.
Yeah. I haven't seen that level of GPT-3. I have seen some experiments from, say, Janelle Shane, who is messes around with AI, just AIweirdness.com, and it was, it was not that impressive, actually. Like, how many eyes does a horse have? And it just like kept saying 4, and
All
you know,
right.
like, I don't know. I think that, who knows? I guess I could be wrong. Like, the way that some people were writing and cranking out formulaic, say, mystery novels or something, I could see AI doing that at some point. But I think there's always going to be a place for becoming you, because there's only one you, and finding a way to present that to the world. So I could be wrong, but I defer to Kai-Fu Lee on this. He doesn't seem to think that that's going to be happening terribly soon, if ever.
In terms of the last thing to be automated by AI would be harnessing that creativity. A lot of the followers on this channel are into writing and note taking. How do you think they can benefit from changing their perspectives on focusing only on being busy and focusing on like managing the time and getting as much as possible out of time, as opposed to focusing on mind management and on creative energy management?
Yeah. So one of the things, I'm a note taker as well. I've sort of built my own little Zettelcast in, and I think one of the things that makes it work is a lot of is similar to what I've found in writing this book, which is that um, you don't arrive at great insights, or you don't arrive at learning all at once. Taking notes makes it, just reduces the cognitive load for thinking about, say, what is this book about? You just like write one little note, another note, another note, another note, and then eventually you can connect those things and make a summary, or you can connect ideas from different places and make new ideas. And this is kind of like one of the things that I've discovered in dissecting creativity. There is this sort of framework for understanding the stages of creativity. I'm calling it in the book, The 4 Stages of Creativity. Is based upon a speech by a German scientist from the late 1800s, which was then picked up by a named Hermann von Helmholtz. And then there was a social scientist named Graham Wallace who called it the 4 Stages of Control, and which I just adapted to the 4 stages of creativity. And they're preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. So preparation is the collecting of information. Incubation is the sort of pulling away from the problem space. And there's all sorts of subconscious incubation that happens that makes things easier to later connect for new ideas. Illumination is that moment of having an insight. And then verification is preparing something to verifying that it's ready to be shipped, or that it actually is a valid idea. And so this is something that happens when you're taking notes. Is you're doing the preparation, you're just collecting these short little notes, and that is as you're doing that, you're exercising those connections in your mind. And so as you sleep or as you do other things, your brain is sort of testing out connections. It's any sort of bad dead end connections that you came up with along the way. Those are falling away. It's called fixation forgetting. And then later on, when you do sit down to, say, write the summary of the book that you just took a bunch of notes on, suddenly it's way, way easier because that stuff has sunk into your mind. We very easily forget when we sit down and say, oh, I'm going to try to write a summary of this book, or I'm going to try to write an article or a blog post. And, oh gosh, this is hard. Why is that hard? Well, one thing that we're trying to do when we do that is we're trying to use our short-term memory to do all of the work at once. So if we don't have the knowledge sunk into our long-term memory, and remember, our short-term memory holds very little. It's like 4 to 7 digits, plus or minus a couple, that you can remember. And when it comes to information, language information, it's not a whole lot more than that. And so when you're taking in new information and at the same time trying to connect it to make new insights, that is a tall order for your short-term memory. And so one thing that is helpful from taking notes is that you are holding that information in your short-term memory. It's getting a chance to pass into your long-term memory. And then, you go rest, you come back. Now, when you sit down and try to come up with the insights, try to connect the ideas, there's something to pull from that's from your long-term memory, and your short-term memory is freed up, has available resources for you to make the connections instead of trying to both take in new information and make the connections at the same time.
What have you changed in your kind of daily or weekly routines to take this into account? So how have you changed the way that you write and do your research to gain more insights?
Mm-hmm. So one thing I do is I work according to mental state. And this is something that I have discovered in the creative process is I discovered, I found like 7 different mental states that I saw myself inhabiting in the process of general life and creating things. And so 7 mental states is kind of a lot for audio. Sometimes don't want to like overload people with it, but just take for example, a couple of mental states are generate and explore. Generate, explore, and research are a few, and these have kind of fuzzy boundaries to them. and one thing I discovered was that a lot of things where I thought I was sitting down to do a thing, it actually better broke up into a few different things. So if I am trying to write a blog post, now I will give myself permission to write really, really crappy, just like some bullet points, some free prose, putting things in brackets where I'm
When are
going
you,
to use.
when during the day are you usually doing this? Is this a particular time of the day or just,
So
or it doesn't really
that's,
matter?
I actually have an entire weekly routine that I follow, that goes according to uh, sort of what I decided I want to accomplish. And again, that's difficult to picture in audio, two people talking. But so for that, that's explore mental state, and that will typically be either in the afternoon or after I've already done some more um, pointed creation, which I call the generate mental state.
So this
So,
is where you're kind of like stream of consciousness kind of writing.
well, so the generate mental state is I'm trying to create something that actually stands some chance of becoming usable. I've got the general connections made in my mind, and I'm just trying to weave things together. And yeah, there's going to be some misspellings. There'll probably be some facts that I don't have handy, that I want to look up later, and I'll put those in brackets because I'm trying to stay in state. And that's one of the valuable things about having these mental states to work with, is it makes you realize this is where I found myself getting cognitively caught up, was when I was same writing a thing, and what was the year that thing happened, and so now I've got to go look it up. And one, that's a distraction risk. Two, though, it's changing states. Like I'm trying to connect these ideas, and now there's like some facts which isn't actually consequential to what I'm writing necessarily, and I go fetch it. So now instead it's like brackets, or let's say I'm writing something and I say, I need some stories or examples to illustrate this thing, and I just type brackets stories or examples to illustrate this thing. And like separately at some other time, I can sit down in my recliner with my favorite drink and brainstorm examples or stories for that. So it's like changing body position, changing my time and my environment, and working according to the ebb and flow of my energy to do the right type of work, do the right type of thinking during the right time according to my energy. And so as I was saying before, that generate state, I'll typically do that first thing in the morning, because it's very important to me to generate work, especially if I'm working on a book. Sit down, spend an hour at least on generate state. And then I get like I'm a little fatigued at that point. Like I could still think a little bit, I can still write a little bit. So then that's a good time then for some explore mental state, as I was talking about, which is I'm writing, but I'm not expecting to be able to use this. I'm just sort of barfing out the things that I might want to talk about or think about for
Right.
this. Now, Explore also shares a fuzzy border with research, which is that, exploration isn't just, creating sloppy things. It can also be that you're reading something and you're not looking for anything particular, but there's maybe some chance that you're going to find something here. For me, that's like reading a lot of artist biographies and just highlighting as I go. Or when I was working on my first book, which was about design, I might be writing about the history of typography and say I'll read about the Protestant Revolution, which is connected obliquely to the history of typography. And I don't know what I'm going to find, but it's an open-minded state, because the insightful state of mind is different from the analytical state of mind. The more that you're driving toward a goal, the more that you are trying to make a certain thing happen, the more closed your neural activity becomes, and then the less likely for you to have insights. So like people who have damaged prefrontal cortices are really good at solving insight problems in a lab setting. They have other problems.
Oh,
You don't
interesting.
want prefrontal cortex damage if you can help it. But because there's diffused activity in the brain, it makes it easier for them to make connections. And so this is why I make a distinction between, say, explore and research. Research is, that fact that I need to fill out where I had the brackets. Now I can sit down, I can look for the exact answer to that question that I had. And that's different from exploration, right? So breaking things down this way and being mindful of cognitively, what is it like to switch between these? And can I stay in one versus another? And based upon what's important to me and my energy fluctuations throughout the day and throughout the week and throughout even longer cycles, even the year, or for me, even it can be periods of 3 years where I'm dominantly in a certain state. And working that way to propel things through the 4 stages, that sort of works like this creative productivity, perpetual motion machine in a way.
What stage are you in now in this like year-long kind of perspective?
Right. Okay. So right now, I just finished a book.
Yeah.
I've been working on that book for basically for 10 years, but the last 5 years or so has been a lot more intense. And especially the last year was when I was working on the iteration of the draft that actually became the book after trashing 2 or 3 full drafts, or at least have completed drafts. In some cases, I did trash one full draft. So now I am trying to get a little bit more open. I'm not doing the wake up every morning and work on a generate thing. I'm trying to be more exploratory. And so I'm in sort of marketing mode as well. So looking for different channels that I can write things in, but also we're coming upon the end of the year. So a new year's coming up. And I think what a lot of people do, they wake up on New Year's Day and they're like, oh, I should think about what I'm going to do this year. I usually try to start that process weeks and weeks before the new year even happens. And as neuroscientist John Cunhos has told me, who's an expert on one of the leading researchers on the neuroscience of insight, the insightful state is very difficult to get into. It's very easy to get out of. So if you go on a vacation and you lie on a beach for a week straight, after you'll start to have ideas all of a sudden. But then if you're like crossing the street on your way to a restaurant and a car almost hits you and you like have to jump out of the way, well, now that's just been ruined pretty quickly. And now you're in more of a hypervigilant state, which is a little bit more conducive to analytical thinking. So a thing I often try to do as I approach the new year is to try to take as many things off my plate as I can. I often take a break from my podcast. I don't know if I'll do that this year. And try to just disconnect and give myself a chance then to get into, as the new year begins, a prioritize mental state, which is seeing things from 30,000 feet, getting an idea of what's important, just as important as what's important, what's not important, what's the stuff I'm not going to do. And because you can see this cycle in the natural world where try making just like random coffee meetings with somebody in January that you have no business talking to versus in November or December. you're going to probably get more people accepting that random coffee meeting in November or December than January, because January people are focused on their goals. If it's not going to meet these goals, I'm not going to do it. And then entropy starts to set in. You start to see that happen. What is it? People, New Year's resolutions last 3 months or something like that. And people start getting less organized. They start doing more things that don't meet their goals, which has its place. But this is a cycle that you see when you look closely. And it's something I noticed in organizing my podcast. When I do interviews, I try to do them in sort of 3-month blocks. And so December, January, February, all hard times to get somebody to agree to be interviewed. One, December, the holidays are happening. January and February, right, people are really focused on their goals. And then also, late summer, people are on vacation, things like people have or they want to spend time outside because it's nice, and, sitting inside and being on Zoom or something isn't as much of a priority. And so this is another thing that I look at then is there's these cycles in your day, your week, your month, possibly your quarter, your year. And these can go along. You can harness these cycles to work with the 4 stages of creativity. So for example, there's a playwright, Lillian Hellman, who said that she would review the dialogue of her characters before bed each night, and then she would sleep, and then in the morning she'd write again. So that's using That's using the night's sleep as incubation. When I lived in Chicago and I had to go through these brutal winters, this brutal winter was a good time for I guess you could call it preparation, like staying inside, learning a new programming language, reading some stuff that you're interested in, or it can be a time for verification. You're finishing up a project and you need to buckle down and.
Would you say that your last few years has been predominantly one of verification, and you're in that kind of analytical mindset because you're revising your drafts, getting rid of them, making it better, polishing it up?
No, I think there's been a lot of. I've been sort of consistently going through those 4 stages, and that's one great reason why I'm in Medellin, is that Medellin is very consistent, and so it's better for having not so much a year long. In terms of the consistent. Medellin is very consistent because it's the same. It's the city of the eternal spring. It's room temperature all year long, and the sun rises and sets about the same time all year long. Basically, rises around 6 a.m., sets around 6 p.m. all year. Now, contrast that if you're living in Chicago. Or growing up where I did in the Midwest, where in the winter it's dark at 4 p.m.
And is this one of the reasons that you moved to Medellin?
I came to one of the reasons I moved to Medellin was basically just I was looking back at the work that I had done while I was here. And I was like, well, I'm just doing way better work there, and I'm generally happier when I'm here as well. And so as I was trying to figure out how to optimize my creative output, I was then attracted to Medellin. But then looking at things, I started to realize certain patterns like that, where I could see, okay, I could see how this is good for consistently going through these 4 stages on a daily, weekly. I mean, the weeks just melt by because my weeks have been basically identical for 5 years. Now contrast that to when I lived in Chicago, and you have summer where you've got to go outside. Everybody's outside all the time.
You get FOMO if you don't go out.
You do. Yeah. You do. And that can be, that's the time where you can have the big ideas because you're out, you're in the open spaces, and so it's a good time for illumination. And then fall comes and maybe you're going to do some verification.
What do you think is the most important things in terms of consistently generating insights? Or what do you think has
Um,
helped you the most, I guess, in terms of generating insights and the big ideas on a consistent basis?
yeah, I think being patient with results, respecting those four stages. To like when you're sitting down and you're like trying to have that make that insight come and it's not coming, and you get frustrated over it, that doesn't happen so much once you understand that there are these four stages. I mean, yeah, you still do the whole, maybe you don't feel like writing today, but you sit down and you do it. But you can at least understand that, oh, if I'm blocked right now, um, and it's not a strictly emotional thing, then I, something's missing. I haven't done that preparation. And so maybe it's time to step back and get into the explore mental state and allow myself to just barf out some stuff extemporaneously and to hold it gently. Like I keep thinking of like there was this Jack Nicklaus golf uh, golf my way VHS cassette that I used to watch as a kid learning how to golf.
Oh, I
And
didn't know you had that.
yeah, and he would always talk about the hold the club like a bird. Like if you were holding a bird, you gotta be like really gentle with the bird. Like you can't fly away, but you're not crushing it, right?
Right.
And so I think of the same way with ideas. Is like, yeah, you're holding on, you're getting your mind focused on it, but you can't just be like, come on,
I
you
like that
know.
analogy.
And I also think of it in terms of sort of a surround and conquer strategy. I've looked at military strategy and tried to find a perfect analog to this. The best analog I could find that I've only heard and haven't verified was basically that when Facebook was trying to infiltrate, I think it was University of Michigan. Like they were starting just with universities.
Yep.
The University of Michigan had a competing social network, and everybody was already on that social network. And Facebook's like, well, how can we get those students to sign up for Facebook if they're already on this Michigan University social network? So what they did was they started concentrating on all the universities in Michigan, the smaller universities, because all the people who go to those small universities went to high school with the people in the big university. So it was easy for them to get people to sign up to Facebook at those smaller universities. And so suddenly these people at Michigan start getting, oh, this is my fifth friend request I've gotten now for this new network, Facebook. So it's like a surround and conquer thing. And I try to think of creative problems in the same way, in that if there's an area that I want to focus on,
Right.
but I really have trouble getting any insight there, try to sort of go around it. And, for example, I've wanted to learn more about storytelling, say fiction writing. But I like to read fiction now, but didn't naturally want to read. I was one of those people who never read fiction. I only read nonfiction. So I said to myself, well, where's like an easier place for me to attack that will sort of, through spreading activation, maybe would be the right term, would eventually spread to where I would start reading fiction. And I realized, well, I watch a lot of movies. And so I said, well, I'll start reading books that are made into movies that I like, that I've already seen. So I'm like, read Election. I read the story that The Shawshank Redemption is based off of, that Stephen King wrote. There's another one for the movie Stand By Me. So I started reading these stories. There's stories that I know that I like because I've seen the movie, and I'm not bored enough that I'm not going to want to read the story. I want to see how how did things change? And then even extended that to reading screenplays of the movies that I liked. So I'd be like I'm reading and I'm reading stories. And so now I'm to the point where, I'm like reading, I'm still reading fiction that is mostly movies that I like. But then that got me to like read screenwriting books such as Story by Robert McKee. And so I've learned a lot about story through that. And I think that my storytelling has gotten a lot better. And hopefully that's apparent in mind management, not time management. There's a storytelling arc to the book. And so I think that not trying to attack directly this thing that you're trying to have this great idea about, keeping an open mind, sort of going for the areas the paths of least resistance that are adjacent to it, and allowing that to spread. Eventually, it saturates to the point where you're either attacking this area that you wanted to attack, or maybe more often, you're in this other place that you never expected to go, but that, nobody else is here. And this is a cool idea. So then that's the whole, you can't connect the dots moving forward type of thing. The Steve Jobs quote from the commencement address, to follow curiosity, to trust that it will take you down these different paths, and that those paths will eventually converge, and you'll be in this amazing place.
Do you think that in terms of generating insights, do you think that the environment, your surroundings, these things, do you think they make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that can cut both ways. I think it's probably a mindset thing where if you just tell yourself, well, I don't like this environment, but I need to get this done, I'm going to do it. You can do that. But being comfortable, being in a relaxed state, having a positive mood, these things are shown over and over again in the lab to lead to insights. And so I'm constantly altering my environment. I have a standing sitting desk. I have a recliner with an overbed table, so I can lay back and write on my iPad, or I can sketch on a little whiteboard. I even take my recliner to my desk sometimes, so I'm like laying back on my computer. I have uh, a hammock that I will lie in, and it really depends on what sort of state of mind I'm trying to think in. I think that we, especially as people are working from home and having a little more control maybe over their environment than they did in the office, it's a good time for us to recognize that, you don't have to be sitting at your desk at your computer to be quote unquote working. I try to remind myself very often if I need to check some emails or need to respond to some emails. Well, why not lay back in the hammock with your phone and do that instead of trying to do it at your computer? Or I need to research some media outlets that I want to pitch. Again, why are you sitting at your computer doing that? You can get your iPad out and sit back in the recliner and read and maybe take some notes, and you'll be more relaxed. You'll be more open-minded, and you'll have better ideas that way too. So another way that I have altered my environment, and sometimes you're limited. So when I was first starting on my own and I was living in San Francisco, I had this tiny bedroom at the end of this shotgun house that I was sharing with a bunch of people, or with a couple other people, and
yeah.
Tiny bedroom. And I was working. When I was working, the cafes were closed. So I was like, didn't want to, it's like kind of bad to work next to your bed. And it's bad to try to sleep next to where you work for your mind, because you are programming yourself to be in these states by the environment. And so I had a Soji screen that I kept around my desk. And so I had a routine. When it was time to work, I set up the Soji screen in a certain way. I clipped a lamp on it. I bounced the light in a certain way. I had an aromatherapy diffuser that I put a certain scent on. I had a certain album that I would play. So I'm using all my senses to create some kind of trigger to get myself into a certain state. Now, you can create your own personal placebo for this. It doesn't have to be certain. There's research that supports, certain things, but it can also be if you just tell yourself that this is going to make me be in this state. If you do it enough times, like it'll probably eventually work.
Nice. I heard about writers before that some of the writers who were working from home before the lockdown and pandemic, whatever, they would go outside, take the tram, circle the block, come back to the house to create this kind of mental delineation to kind of say that, hey, I'm about to start working now, and that's kind of the signal to the brain.
Their commute.
Yeah, that's a fake commute.
Cool.
So they're just like commuting, one station, forward and back.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. Anything you can do to create some kind of separation. I'm reminded of a story told by Josh Waitzkin in the book, The Art of Learning. Yeah, right. Where he's talking to this executive, and this executive is saying, "I'm really distracted in meetings. I wish I could concentrate better in meetings. I wish I could be in a flow state." And Josh says, "Well, when are you in a flow state?" "Oh, when I'm playing catch with my son." Well, you can't play catch with your son in meetings, but Josh created this series of triggers for this executive. Do these stretches, have this snack, listen to this Bob Dylan song, then play catch with your son, and do that over and over again. And then eventually start taking things away, where you do these stretches, have this snack, listen to this Bob Dylan song, go to your meeting. To eventually removing these things to where he could just think of the Bob Dylan song and go to the meeting and be in the mental state that he wanted to be in.
I think this is really relevant now, especially with lockdown coming back in a lot of countries around the world, and a lot of people may not have the option of working. Like, my favorite setting is to work in cafes, and so I don't have that option at the moment, being in Europe. And it's kind of I've had to kind of experiment with different triggers, as you say, and playing around with different things inside of the apartment. And I played around with like walking around the block, trying a bunch of different stuff to create this distinction, and also to get into this flow state.
Mm-hmm. Anything that works?
Yeah, so definitely going for walks in the park make a really big difference. So I always start my day now with either a walk in the park or a jog in the park. I know that exercising makes a big difference. But if I'm doing like creative stuff, then I find that exercising actually takes a little bit of brain power. So if I know that I'm trying to do creative work that morning, then I'll just go for a light walk around the park, come back, and then pen and paper, just start kind of writing. I find that that's kind of been the most effective thing. Previous to that, I found that cafes where I found the perfect cafe where I always got like my best ideas and stuff, which is it's on the second floor. It has like huge glass pane windows from ground to ceiling, and it's very high ceilings, bookshelves everywhere, like wooden furniture as well, and kind of warm lighting as well, and you can see like the whole city as well. Well, not the whole city, but parts of the city, and traffic as well. And for some reason, that setting always kind of relaxed me.
Yeah, I think open space, soft lighting, activity, these things can help with creative ideas. I do think that it sort of depends upon your particular mental state at the time. So for me, I like to write in the morning. I'm quite groggy in the morning, and the research suggests that if you're groggy, that you'll be a little bit more open to having insights. Um, so
Why would being
now,
groggy make you more open to insights?
oh, that's interesting. So basically kind of what I was saying about the prefrontal cortex, that if your prefrontal cortex is damaged, that you'll be more prone to having insights. Well, first thing in the morning, your prefrontal cortex, if you're groggy, isn't working particularly well. So, if you can think about it like a racquetball court with blue balls bouncing all over the place, and your prefrontal cortex is like sitting there trying to hit the ball to the front wall the whole time, like wanting to follow the rules. And when the blue balls collide, then that's an idea. You have more collisions when you're kind of groggy, and so I try to take
I like that.
advantage of that. But because I'm groggy, I'm also not super disciplined. So for the first couple years that I was trying to redesign my life around writing, I had just a plain desk in a cove, white walls on 3 sides, and that's where I wrote in the morning. Now, that's not the best. That's not an environment that is necessarily encourages creative thinking, but given my mental state at the time, it was a compensation for that sort of
Right.
grogginess, so I could still be creative, but I wouldn't get distracted so easily. Now, for me, my energy's late afternoon is more my peak, and this is kind of a typical this is kind of typical of a lot of people, is groggy first thing in the morning, sort of a mental peak a couple hours after waking up, and then a dip in the afternoon, and then late afternoon uh, back again. So for me, more late afternoon, when my energy is a little higher, that's where, if I would go to a noisy cafe, if I have more of a view, that's where I'm a little bit more ready for that sort of stuff. But it's also a different type of creativity, where that's more of a big C creativity for me, where if I'm going to brainstorm about what new idea should I pursue, or how can I uh, better organize my business, that's a good time for
So this is like your
not even better
exploration.
organized. Yeah, more of an exploratory thing, rather than a generate uh, state, which is what I'm typically using my mornings for.
Nice. Okay. We're at the end of the interview. What's So the last question I'd like to ask is, what are the top kind of 3 books that you most recommend, or that you kind of love the most?
Well, I've been writing some book summaries lately, and so I guess these are kind of my favorite books. Getting Things Done. My top
Yes,
three
classic.
my top 3 productivity books are Getting Things Done, Getting Things Done, and Getting Things Done.
Okay.
No, I've got other books for you. So Getting Things Done, I actually made a summary of it on my podcast recently, and article is up as well. I'm writing a summary right now for The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. I think that in the creative age, as creators, we need to think about uh, crazy ideas that are likely not to work, but that if they do work, have a chance of a really big upside of being positive black swans. And we need to organize accordingly and make our decisions accordingly to account and provide space for that serendipity to happen. Number 3, there's a recency effect to all of this, but I'm reading Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, and I had heard the expression "the medium is the message," and I never really understood it until I started reading his book, and you really see it everywhere. Um, it's been interesting to study his perspective on media. It is a book that is 50 years old, and it sounds like it was written like 10 years from now. It sounds like it's from the future.
Well,
His insights are really incredible about, especially as we're talking about approaching this creative age, he talks a lot about mechanization versus electrification, and how as we mechanized society, things got categorized and made to be cogs that fit with one another. And humans too, we became cogs of, get this degree, you can do this job, and if you leave this job, this other person can do it. We can just slide that person right in there. But he talks about how electrification actually swings us back to a more organic, more tribal culture. Because
interesting.
In part because it just allows for a more organic organization of things. It doesn't have to be top down the way that a cog works. It can be the way that an electrical network works, or the way the internet works. And he's writing this in the 60s, or the way the brain works, the way the neural connections,
the neurons work. Yeah,
right. Yes. Or you could think about the Greeks. Before there was writing, they conveyed knowledge through oral stories, things like the Iliad. And that's where the knowledge was. And so now you go read a business book, and it's like this boring ass bullet point list of piece of information. That's like peak mechanization right there. I can hardly stand to read these things. And so one of the things I'm doing with my management, not time management, that I know a lot of people are going to hate, is that it is more story, and the information is packed within these stories, and it is these layers that interconnect, that build upon each other throughout the book, because that's the only way I can understand the information.
More organic.
It's more organic that way. And so reading McLuhan's Understanding Media is making me see today's world in a very different way as I think about this idea of mechanized versus electrified.
That's very interesting. Yeah, with AI automating so much of our so many of the things that we can do, it's not a straight line anymore, right? So it's much more chaotic, and I think that's
Extremistan.
Extremistan, yes, it's a Taled's thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Any last words? Anything that you want to add before we finish up?
No, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of your listeners are very well versed in managing their own mental energy already. I'm hearing a lot of people saying, "Oh gosh, I've already was doing some of this stuff." But if you'd like to hear my perspective on it, my story, what I've discovered, and maybe find some ways that'll help you refine the things that you've already thought of, then do check out my book, Mind Management, Not Time Management. I've worked really hard on it, very proud of it. And I'm really excited to have it out there with the world, taking it in and doing what whatever they will do with it.
Awesome. Well, that's Mind Management, Not Time Management. Congratulations again on the book.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.